Welcome to Becoming Spiritual, a podcast about the magic that surrounds us and has always been a part of us. I'm your host, Heather Dolan, a passionate seeker dedicated to bringing together beautiful humans who are doing amazing things in this world. Together, we will explore healing modalities and practical spiritual practices that can enrich your everyday life. We will also hear stories of awakenings, many from people in the corporate world who have broken out of the spiritual closet. Wherever you are in your journey, know you have found a community of open-hearted individuals committed to making themselves and our world a better place. Welcome home. In today's episode, Natalie and I sit down with Lee Van Zyl. Lee is a former lawyer from South Africa who now lives and works in Clifton, New Jersey as a medium, healer, and spiritual tutor. She's the owner of the Montclair Psychic School, which is also located in Clifton, one of the foremost schools in the New York City metro area for the development of psychics, mediums, and healers. Lee has been doing this work for the last 18 years. So her journey is really cool. It is one of the pillars of this podcast of going from this corporate role, being a lawyer, opening up into her spiritual gifts, in this case through mediumship. And she shares a lot about that shift and what that looked like and how it was a very gradual progression. So I think many will find that fascinating, as I do hear many of you really appreciate how people have transitioned either into full-time spiritual work or just how we can embrace this in our everyday life and how it can help us heal and move through the world with maybe a little bit more ease. So we're going to talk about that. Also, this podcast has a lot of elements that we've talked about in previous episodes. Specifically, in our most recent episode with Willow, we talked about healing being a foundation for really everything, to really step into your gifts and to also really just step into who you are. We need to do a lot of healing coming into this life and being in these bodies. And so the conversation that the three of us had in this episode also discusses healing as a foundation for mediumship, which might be a surprise when you think about being a medium. Probably healing isn't the first thing that comes to mind. So we're going to talk about that. And then she's going to talk about really understanding and embracing the Clair senses. We debunk some myths. She gives some good practical and grounded advice for those who might be aspiring to become mediums, or even if you're just looking to get a reading, what you should be looking out for. So it's a fun conversation. Lee has a fun energy. So I hope you enjoy this episode. And we would love to hear any comments or feedback on the episode. So please feel free to go to becomingspiritual.me. Look at our resource page where we will share a lot of resources from this episode and all of our episodes. But we would love to hear from you in our feedback form if you have ideas for other episodes or if this resonated with you. So without further ado, let's jump in. Welcome back to Becoming Spiritual. I'm your host, Heather Dolan, and I'm joined by the very magical Natalie Grace.
Hi.
Hi. And we are excited to be joined by Lee Van Zyl, who is the owner of the Montclair Psychic School in Montclair, New Jersey. So welcome.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. We're so excited to jump into this. Natalie and I were chatting ahead of this about mediumship, and both of us are definitely beginners when it comes to this. Of course, we see all the mediumship shows that are out there in the world. I mean, I feel like there's umpteen now at this point, reality shows, but definitely want to learn more from you and share with the audience, for those who might not have gone down this path before, just more about mediumship, your journey from corporate into this space and the work that you're doing now. So before we start with mediumship, could you just share kind of a little bit about the psychic school and the work that you're doing? Because you're much more multifaceted than just medium, having just come out of a trance channeling session, but super cool work that you do.
Yeah, thank you. My school came about in around 2006. And what we do is we focus on mediumship development. So it's a development of evidentiary mediums. And once I started on that journey, it became quite apparent to me that mediums have to do a lot of healing because we get triggered. So that kind of got me interested in healing as well. So I developed a lot of healing modalities, but I was so new to spirituality when I first started out. I've kind of expanded myself by going to classes and also bringing people to my place. So the school kind of unfolded naturally. So it's a school for the development of psychic mediums and healers. So basically anything intuitive we teach. The focus though is on mediumship, and we focus on Usui Reiki because it's the most widely performed energy healing system in the world. But everything else is all interconnected. So that's why we'll have tarot classes, pendulum classes, different kinds of psychic development, and also lots of meditation, different kinds of sound, vibrational healing, breath work, all that kind of stuff, past life regression. It's all interconnected.
Yeah. I love that you said that about needing to do the healing work and how that all unfolded to open up to a lot more modalities than just being a school for mediumship or psychic abilities, because it's so important. And we hear all the time, we've got to help heal the healer so that they can keep doing all this great work. But so often I know they put themselves last. So it's really beautiful that you've brought everything into one space where people can do this work. And I've seen, because I'm on your email list, and I took your pendulum class 2 summers ago, which was really fascinating and fun. I get all the emails with all the circles that you have and development and the Reiki shares and stuff. So it's really wonderful.
Well, actually, with the whole healing thing, generally healing, doing spiritual healing is amazing. But the whole thing with mediumship that I discovered, and I only got it figured out about 7 years into my journey, that the self-confidence issues and trust issues that mediums experience when they do reading, it's actually emotional trauma that we hold on to. Because this is the one modality where people view you as a fraud, as a con artist, So it's either you're ripping people off, you're making up stuff. We get accused of doing research on Facebook when we do readings. Of course, there's always some people who do get up to shenanigans, right? And then, of course, religion comes into play. So, I mean, if you're a medium, you put yourself on social media, you're going to have all the Christians starting to come at you. So we get a lot from people. So when we do the readings, you not only have to deal with that kind of perception and having the public coming to you from that perception, but also it seems as if a lot of mediums are actually people who are quite introverted and shy. Public speaking is one of the biggest fears that most people have. So you've got so many things going on when you're doing a reading, and you don't trust, you worry about people's expressions, what are they going to think? So all of this is emotional stuff that gets triggered, because I would say 7 years into my journey, I would feel nauseous before readings. I would get so nervous, so stressed out.
Wow.
And I never realized a teacher I was training with someone, and they said, you've got to go on the healing journey. And I found that the more I healed and the more stuff I released, feelings of inadequacy, self-confidence issues and everything, which is really stuff we hold onto from childhood, the better my mediumship became. And then I noticed, I no longer feel sick to my stomach when I do readings. So this is actually a huge component. So now with my mentoring, particularly more advanced mediums, we do a lot of focus on inner healing as well.
Wow, that's really interesting because, I'm thinking the average school, if someone were to come trained in mediumship, they would probably come in, go through some classes, sit in some circles and be like, okay, I'm ready to go, and probably have these issues and then not understand why.
Yeah, well, that's what I did. You jump into it. I had a teacher who really pushed me a lot, very fast actually. But the thing is, when you start to fully understand everything about spirit communication, how it works, and working with students, then you see, well, there's a lot more to things. Actually, working with spirit, it's interesting. We work with the dead. And in working with the dead, the way the spirit world actually elicit information from us, they encourage us to live life to its fullest. So you're working with the dead, and in working with the dead and learning to speak with the dead, you learn to live. And part of that living life and experiencing life is also healing your own life. So it's been a really interesting journey, with all these facets that I never really understood until a few years ago.
Wow, that's really beautiful. Well, I'm glad you're able to share that part of your journey to better everyone else as they're learning and moving
Yeah.
and growing through this process. But even just what you said about working with the dead so that you can actually have a better life living right now here in the present.
It's actually quite interesting because when you think in terms of, well, how do mediums get information? Well, firstly, we all have psychic gifts. So when they come and speak with us, they'll trigger our various psychic gifts. So they can show us something, make us hear something, feel, smell, taste, or know something. And it's very subtle, right? So they can give us information through the psychic gifts. But the thing is, it's not like speaking to a real person. Spirit communication is passing thoughts. It's almost like charades, and it's impressions through the psychic gifts. So the challenging part for the spirit world is, how do we get this person that I've never met before, how do I get them to talk about me with specifics and share things about myself and get them to say it out loud? Particularly in cases, for example, where you might have the spirit communicator that's a dead person might have been Japanese. I don't speak Japanese. So somehow there's got to be some kind of universal language that we can speak. So how they trigger us is they actually go into our field of awareness, our memory banks. So they can go into our mind and they can elicit information or experiences that we've had, and they can trigger it. So let's say someone worked on a car. I might see someone work on a car, but also they might show you someone that you know in the spirit world. So for example, if someone might have enjoyed working on cars, I might see my father because he always serviced our cars. So they can show people that are familiar to you to give you clues. But essentially, if you've never had the experience of something, how do they get you to talk about it? So this is why, for example, food. The spirit world love to talk about the food they used to cook, their favorite foods, all this kind of stuff, because it's usually around the dinner table that families get together, right? That's how you show love, through food. So this is quite a popular thing that spirit shares with us. But if you've never tasted that food or you're unfamiliar with the food, how can you talk about it? So one way, to give you an example of how we're supposed to live, we've got to go out and experience it. We've got to broaden our horizons. So one of the things I always tell the new mediums, start going to eat at different restaurants, experience different cultures so you can put all that awareness into your mind. We do research on diseases, 20 most common causes, how people would die. So we've got to put all this information in. We take a look at what are the different careers that you get, what are all the different kinds of hobbies. If you drink, if you don't drink, how are you going to recognize it? But if you do drink, maybe walk around a liquor store and go and look, they drink whiskey. Well, what kind of whiskey do they drink? You've got to put all this info inside your mind. So that's kind of in that way, you've got to experience things and live life, have the experiences, so it's in your field of awareness. Spirit can then pull it out of you. If it's not there, you can't say it.
Fascinating.
That is so fascinating. I never thought about that aspect, or obviously having not gone through mediumship.
Yeah, because people think spirits speak to us all the time, right? We just repeat.
Right.
But clairaudience, which is the gift to hear spirit, it can be very unreliable. And we all have one particular psychic gift that's very well developed. So some people might see things, some people might feel, some people might hear. We all have one that will be quite predominant, but we'll still be able to work through the others to a lesser extent. Now, contrary to popular belief, everyone thinks the third eye. Everyone wants, my third eye needs to be opened. We see everything. But actually, that's not the most predominant psychic gift with most people. Most people feel or sense the information. They don't see it. So they sense or feel, which is connected to different chakras. That's the most predominant. And then when we talk about hearing, you can hear spirit outside your ears. That's called objective clairaudience. And that would be pretty easy, right? If they're just speaking to you, you hear it clearly, then you can just repeat what you're getting. Even if it's a foreign language, you can kind of repeat what they're saying. But there's very, very few mediums who actually have objective clairaudience when they do readings. So for most people, if you're going to hear, it's going to be very subtle. So the subtleness of that kind of clairaudience is it's kind of inside your head. So if you were to imagine someone singing happy birthday to you, you imagine that. That's how the sound comes out, and that's not very reliable. So that's why, we've got to find other ways, because very few people hear, and if they do hear, it's not going to be too accurate. So we have to kind of constantly work on other ways of eliciting information. Because when you get a piece of evidence, you can get the same piece of evidence through different psychic gifts. So for example, let's go back to the car mechanic. You can see someone working on a car, but the sounds of someone working on a car, the clanking, maybe the revving of an engine, working on cars, you can hear. But you might also smell the inside of a garage, or you might smell car grease on the hand, right? Or it might even evoke a smell as well. So you can get all the same information through the various psychic gifts.
Wow. I'm curious, do you have objective clairaudience?
I used to.
Oh.
Several years ago, and actually I'm going back to when I was young. When I was around 10 years old, I used to hear spirit outside my ears. And I thought I was schizophrenic, actually, because I had these voices and I didn't know what it was. And then I saw the movie Sybil. I don't know if you ever remember that movie with Sally Field. And then I read the book and I became convinced I'm schizophrenic. And living in South Africa, no one spoke about mental disease. It's not like nowadays here in the US, everyone's got a therapist. Everyone has one. In South Africa, it was a different kind of culture. No one would ever admit to going to a therapist because it just wasn't received well. So I remember when I became a self-diagnosed at the age of 10 schizophrenic, I thought, well, I mustn't say anything to anyone in case people in white coats come and haul me away.
Yeah.
So I really struggled with all of this for a long time. And then at one point, the voices stopped. And I never really connected the dots until I started developing my mediumship when I was older. And it's like, oh, okay, that's what that was. So I don't get it. Believe me, I've begged the spirit, well, please just give me back that hearing. But I don't have it, But we all sometimes hear objectively. We can all hear spirit objectively. So, if you've maybe heard your name yelled out, you turn around, right?
Yep.
You heard it clearly, right? It was objectively. That's spirit, that's a call out. So a lot of us will maybe get that objective clairaudience when we least expect it. But when it moves into the mediumship reading, the actual communication, we don't hear it that loudly. But I have actually met 3 mediums in the years that I've been doing this who are objectively clairaudient. Man, that is the most amazing thing to see, because they can literally repeat what Spirit says. These people give readings, they with first, second, last names, address. They could probably give the social security number if Spirit gave it to them.
Wow.
It's the most amazing thing to observe, but it's just extremely rare.
I'm curious, when you asked about turning it back on, I understand maybe it leaving it if it was for protection or boundaries or whatever, but I'm curious if you've ever gotten an answer asking why they don't turn it back on.
Oh, I don't know. I would love that to happen. Trust me.
Yeah.
I've been asking. But the thing is, as you develop your mediumship's constantly changing. So at one point I could see spirit very well. Then that got receded. Then I started to feel more. So as you develop, the guides who work with you constantly develop. They'll bring different gifts forward because it's a better way to work with you, or they'll recede some. I don't know anyone who works equal out of every single psychic gift. There's usually one that's more predominant. But back in the day, I just thought I was crazy. So I've tried so many ways, and most people will definitely try and ask Spirit to switch on the clairaudience because it's so nice to be able to do that. But, you got to work with what you have and how it develops. I think it takes a lot of energy to develop that. outside of the ear clairaudience. So I don't know for sure what the answer is. I'm open, Spirit. If you're listening, feel free. It's just the name of the game. It's the name of the game. Even with vision, really, you know, when mediums speak or give readings, you think they're seeing spirit with the eyeballs, but they probably aren't. Because you can have, same with clairaudience, you can have objective clairvoyance. You can see spirit with your eyeballs. Or you see it inside your mind. The third eye will be like your imagination. But some people can see the presence of spirit. Maybe it's faded, maybe it's hazy, like shadows, that kind of thing. But you can also see full-bodied manifestation of spirit. Now, I've seen that on a few occasions as well. But somehow, when you do the mediumship readings, they're not that way. I don't know any mediums who actually see spirit with their eyeballs. Because that would be too easy, right? You have someone just present themselves over there and you can describe it in all its detail. That doesn't happen, but it sometimes is the jargon that mediums use. You know, we'll be doing a reading, like, oh, your grandmother's standing right over there at your left shoulder. People think, oh, they're eyeballing it, but they aren't. It's kind of, I'm aware of your grandmother and my awareness is going to your left shoulder, so I'm feeling she's at your left shoulder. Because if you notice sometimes on these TV shows, mediums will say that, then you get the people like going like this, you know. But it's really not with your eyeballs.
Yeah, I definitely always assume that too, that you could see something there. And not that it was a knowing.
Dispelling the myths.
Yeah, you are. Yeah, we didn't even get to that yet. Natalie, did you have something you wanted to ask?
Just reflecting, I'm really enjoying hearing you speak about this because I had a very similar experience when I was younger, like terrified that I was schizophrenic because I would hear voices.
Yeah.
And to this day, I've never thought that it might be dead people trying to communicate with me. I've always just thought it was like something in the ether that I was picking up on. So this is a whole new tangent for me. But going by what you said about like the obvious gifts being a bit too easy, and once we've gotten a taste of it, they kind of get taken away. It made me think of how I've watched so many of those TV show mediums, and when they really cut through is when they share the feeling that they're getting. That's the human relatable. I'm getting like shivers when I talk about this now, but that's what cuts through to the person receiving. Because like you said, there's so much doubt that can come up, skepticism around this person might already know something, but they can't know the feelings, you know, that deeper feeling and sense. So that must be so powerful for you to like work with and also unlock with your students, that actually you think that the big powers are the seeing and the hearing, but that's very powerful, right?
You see, that's the power of mediumship. It's going to be through the gift of clairsentience. Because if you think about it, you can repeat conversations. Let's say you're hearing them outside your ears, so you'll repeat the conversation. Is there emotion attached to it? Maybe not. If you are very visual, and I've seen mediums who, even though the vision's subtle inside their mind, can describe spirit very accurately. But it's almost like if you're only working clairvoyantly, it's like spirit is over there, now you're describing things about them. So it kind of gives a perception of, well, they're over there, right? Whereas with clairsentience, it works with the feeling and the senses. So you take on their energy, you take on their personality. You can start to bring them to life through the gift of clairsentience, where the personality will come out, their essence. You'll take on those mannerisms. And that's the power of mediumship. When the sitter is with you and they can feel the presence and the essence of their loved ones with you in the room. So I think the holy grail of a mediumship reading is you sit there, you get a reading, and your mom comes through, and it's going to give you the sense or feeling that I've just spoken to my mom. Whereas just the clairvoyance of the description, I had a medium and she saw my mom and she described my mom accurately. But it's clairsentience where there's the power in that. You bring them to life, their essence, their presence. And that's kind of what people really are looking for, when you think in terms of grief, for example, to reconnect to someone's loved ones, that they feel that presence. It's like a sacred experience, right?
Yeah.
And that's the power of spirit communication, if you can get yourself into that place in a reading. So that's what I think mediums strive to do.
So can we back up, because we didn't define mediumship. We've talked a lot about it. How do you, for someone who's like, okay, if I haven't watched one of the million shows out there, how do you define mediumship?
Okay, so mediumship is a chat with your loved ones in the spirit world. So if you lose someone and you'd like to reconnect with one, a mediumship reading, the medium will send their thought out and connect to one of your loved ones who's on the other side, in pure spirit, no longer have their physical body. What we want is evidentiary mediumship. So we would like the spirit person to share things about themselves, various topics, how they died, their personality, what they did for a living, their interests, memories with you, so that you can recognize who they have. Because that's the point. You have to recognize who they have, because you have to speak to someone you know. Once recognized, then they might deliver a message for you. Love, guidance, whatever the case might be. So it's really reuniting you with your loved ones in the spirit world. For healing, for guidance. Many reasons why people would sit with a medium, but it is evidentiary based. So anyone who books a reading, that's kind of what they would be after, to reconnect with those who are now in spirit.
Thank you for that. How often are you able to tap in the exact person that they're wanting?
You cannot guarantee. Essentially, when you sit with a medium, you arrive there and your whole family are there. Everyone in the spirit world is going to be with you. They're part of your soul group. That's your family. So along with these people could be someone who's just recently died. It can be your immediate family. It can be friends. It can also be those who might have passed when you were very young or when you were very little. And sometimes I've noticed the great-grandmas like to sometimes come in first because they still see themselves as the matriarch of this family. And mediums essentially are in service to the spirit world. This is what I teach anyway. You know, people might have a different viewpoint about it with mediumship, but we are in service to spirit. So when spirit comes forward to speak, that's who we should speak to. It might be one of the other relatives who wants to first be heard. So we need to speak to them, because if they don't move out of the way, we're going to struggle with communication, right? So sometimes we need to speak to a few people, and once we're done with them, they'll open the door and bring more people through. And we set the intention that the most important people for the person will come through. So we kind of hope in this natural process of speaking to people's loved ones that the person they wanted to hear from comes through, right? Sometimes it doesn't happen. But what I don't do, and I feel that I'm seeing it in a different way. When I first started doing mediumship, all the TV shows were there, and I didn't understand too much, and people would come in and they'd say, I don't want to hear from her. I can't tell you how many times, I don't want to hear from my mother, but that's who's there.
Right.
You know, I remember in the beginning I'd start apologize. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Let me bring your mother in. You know, and I would try, and sometimes I would be successful, and sometimes it was just a complete mess. I couldn't connect to the mother. This was the person. But if you think about it, these are people, right? These are our family members. So think about this. Someone doesn't want to speak to their mother. But here's mom coming, and she's using me to speak to her daughter. Think in real life what it would feel like to you if you're trying to speak to your daughter, and your daughter, or the medium who's there, the translator's going, go away. Or you start to speak, no, I don't want to talk to you. I mean, think about it in those terms. I think it's quite offensive, really.
Yeah.
You know, so I know some people want to hear from one particular person. Sometimes it can actually block the reading when they're just focused on that one person, don't want to acknowledge any others. So it can make a reading more difficult. If it can come through naturally, that would be great.
Yeah.
I think one of the techniques we teach, if someone only wants to hear from a specific person, Firstly, we don't work like that. But let's say you're doing a reading and it's a struggle, you're not really connecting. So we might then say, by the way, did you only want to hear from a particular person? So let's say they go, yes, I want to hear from my brother Joe. We can try a technique to see if we can invite Joe to come and speak. But then you've got to give a few specific pieces of information at the onset to make sure that it's Joe. And if it's not Joe, the medium needs to say, I'm sorry, I'm unable to connect. It's not that he doesn't love you, I'm simply unable to connect, and to be okay with that. Because we literally can't force it, right?
Right. And I think I had shared a story with someone who was going through the mediumship process and was doing her initial session to practice. Basically, I was practice. I volunteered, and my mom was with me, and my sister, and my mom, she always wants to hear from her mother, my grandmother. We are all very, very close. And so she was just set on like, Granny's going to come through. I know it. She's going to be here. And so my friend starts describing, and we're like, it definitely feels like a grandmother, but not Granny. Like none of us were feeling that. And she described that this woman, who it turns out was my cousin's grandmother, so my mom's sister's mother-in-law, who had passed recently, and my grandmother had been gone for probably 15 years, describing that her pocketbook and that she had specific types of candy in them. And she was showing her the candy in the pocketbook, and we're like, who is this? And then my mom all of a sudden was like, oh my gosh, I think, this is who it is. And it was this like amazing moment, because then when we thought of all the pieces that she had brought out, we're like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. But at the same time, of course, there was this huge disappointment because my mom had this really big expectation of connecting with my grandmother. And so I can see where going in with those expectations can obviously set you up for potential disappointment, no matter how good the medium is.
And sometimes, it seems to me that sometimes spirit will come through because they want to take care of a need in the person who's receiving the reading. So, for example, why do these distant relatives sometimes come through? The sitter doesn't really want to hear from them. So an example of this could be Aunt Maggie comes through, the great aunt, and she's going to be there and she's going to start talking about her abusive husband and the life she had. And the reason she's coming through is you might find that the person receiving the reading is in a similar situation. So out of all the people who could come and speak, Aunt Maggie would be the most equipped to give her guidance and insight, although that's not who the person wanted to hear from. So sometimes spirit does that because sometimes they know what's necessary for you and we don't know. We want a certain thing, we want a certain person, and even in readings, we want to deliver what Spirit's giving us. And sometimes that's not what the people want to hear. They'll decide in advance who's going to speak, what they expect Mom to say, and then Mom doesn't do it.
Right.
She talks about something completely different because I think what we sometimes perceive as important to us is maybe not as important to the spirit world.
Well, it's like we don't know what we don't know in terms of, like you said, the healing that maybe we do need or we're not willing to face, and all of a sudden this brings that up. Or maybe someone close to us, like in the instance of the situation I was sharing, might have been something that my aunt and cousin needed. And for us to be able to share that could change our dynamic, our relationship, good or bad.
Because spirit are opportunistic. There is an intelligence there, right?
Yeah.
So, spirit might have been aware, how do we speak to this family member? Oh, wait a minute, they're going for a reading. So we'll go along and we'll jump on in there. But sometimes a distant person might bring in a message for someone else and not you. That's really why I don't read for friends together. I will read for family members who share loved ones together, but never for friends, because sometimes people want to book a reading and then they'll bring their friend along for moral support. But then you sit in the reading and the person who paid doesn't get any messages. It's the friend. Then they're angry, So the best approach is going to chat to your loved ones, be open, see what they have to say, receive the message, and, don't have too many expectations.
Yeah. we've talked a bit about your childhood because of the objective clairaudience that you were sharing you experienced as a young child, but this wasn't something that you've always tapped into in terms of gifts, and you've shared a bit about that. Can you back up to your journey to getting to where you are now in terms of becoming a medium and then, of course, opening your school?
Yeah, absolutely. Looking back, once I developed my mediumship, a lot of things that happened in my childhood made sense. So from a very early age, being able to see objectively spirit, being very fearful of it actually, and then going through my adolescent years with a clairaudience, a lot of anxiety, depression. It was really hard, not understanding that either. And then I became a lawyer and turned out my father was a medium as well. So when I was around 18, I was an adult already. I found out that he was involved in this kind of thing. So I would sit and chat to him about it. I would sit in a circle that he had, but never do any readings. I was just, oh, what is this? So the thing
he
is,
was active in like circles and doing that stuff, but you really just weren't privy
well,
to...
my cousin's wife had become interested in tarot cards and all kinds of things. And there was this rumbling that my father did something weird. I never quite knew what it was. But he was a Freemason. So I said to this girl, reach out to my dad. He might be able to help you. And then the two of them started doing stuff together. And when I spoke to her, she said, no, I sit with your dad every week and we speak to dead people. I'm like, what? So it turned out they were running a circle out of her house. My dad was going there. So I said, do you think I could maybe come and watch this? So I asked her to ask my dad, and I was actually living with my parents at that stage. It was like so weird. And I said, I need to know because I want a rosary around my neck, I want a crucifix, and I need holy water. Will it still work? Because I was convinced this is exorcism stuff, right?
Oh, wow.
And so she said, look, your dad says you can come along. So I went there, and they were doing a circle, spirit communication, they were doing table work, Ouija board. And I was like, oh, I realized it wasn't frightening, but I never did anything. So I sat there a while, and it was more of a party atmosphere, actually. And then my dad, I started to talk to him about life and death, and he started to explain a lot of stuff about the soul and what happens when we die. And my dad died a few years after that. It wasn't too long after that. It was a shocking, sudden passing, sudden heart attack. But he kind of prepared me for his death. Because when he died, I just saw it so differently. I was able to really understand the shocking passing. But of course, once he died, well, that was the end of that. It was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not getting involved in this stuff again. So I kind of let it go. I became a lawyer for many years. And then when my daughter was born, I was very unspiritual. In fact, I was a very staunch Catholic until a certain time when we moved here. And I wasn't spiritual at all. And then when my daughter was born, from the time she was 2 years old, she started to speak to people that we couldn't see. She called them her spookies, and it scared the bejesus out of me. We didn't know what to do with this child. This was in the apartment that we were living in, and then we moved into the woods. We built a house in the woods, and I thought, oh, okay, great. We're going to leave all of this stuff behind us. We get to the new house, there's a brand new driveway, and I bought a sidewalk chalk for the first time. And I said, why don't you draw us something? She was such an artistic kid. And she draws what looks like Casper and the Friendly Ghost. And I said, Jordan, what are you drawing? And she said, the spookies. I said, they stayed at the apartment, right? She says, no, they all came with us. They're all over here. So
probably more here too. Now we have new
so
ones.
That really unnerved me. I actually became quite frightened of all of this. Because they're weird, these kids, when they do that. And you don't really understand what's going on. And then eventually when she was starting school, she seemed to be the odd child because this was a constant thing. And she was getting bullied. And I found a place for her here in New Jersey that worked with kids. And it was almost like she found this place. It was a Saturday. I'd take her there. And it was run by a shaman. And she was so awesome with the kids. She was teaching them psychic development and meditation and shamanism and working with the earth and all that, even Reiki. She got attuned into Reiki when she was 8 years old.
Wow.
And then, that's how I stumbled upon my first class, because I was literally waiting for her one Saturday and I happened to glance up on the notice board and saw a mediumship class that got advertised. And so I said to the woman, like, can I take that? I don't know, it was on a whim. And I took it, and that was my first teacher from Australia, actually. She's near Melbourne. And she developed me, and I was pretty shocked that I seemed to be able to do this, but she actually really pushed me a lot. She set me up and insisted that I start doing a circle, and everything just developed very, very quickly. And then the person closed their center. And by then I was sitting in a weekly mediumship circle, and I really enjoyed it. I never ever did this to think I was going to work as a medium. It's just I was really fascinated and just loved this connection to spirit. And then I found an office so we could continue sitting in circle. And before I knew it, it was suddenly a business and suddenly a school. And a few years later, I was working so hard, doing the regular job during the day, weekends, spiritual work. Then it was nighttime spiritual work. And then after a few years of that, she said, well, I'm packing it in. I'm going to do this full time now.
What a story.
It's crazy, Sometimes I look, it's like, yeah, I never had that on my bingo card. Because I'd never spent a day in my life ever thinking, I wonder what it's like to be a psychic or a medium. And what is a healer? Who knows what that is? That was such a foreign concept. Yeah. So it's really interesting if you open up sometimes and just trust and follow your gut, maybe, wonderful things can happen. And so it unfolded so naturally, quickly, but naturally at the same time.
I'm really curious with, especially having been a lawyer where you're taught very specifically how to think, how to ask questions, how to assess risk and stuff. Was it difficult to unwind that going into the mediumship path, or was it just like doors were blown open and they're like, great, you're back. Thanks. What took you so long?
You know what? It's weird. Firstly, the lawyer part of me likes evidentiary mediumship because you've got to think like a lawyer. You've got to prove your case. But also lawyers don't like asking questions they don't know the answers to, and that's the challenging part, right?
That's true. I live with one.
You're speaking to two people who have lawyer partners. So
exactly. Oh, okay. Yeah. So we can.
Yeah. So it challenges you. It's very challenging.
Yeah.
But interestingly, I was a rescue medium for 7 years.
What does that mean? So like an investigator.
No. Rescue mediumship. That's where people have spirit attachments. So that can be spirits who didn't cross over and they attract attachments. That's a healing, actually. So what you want to do is, engage with that spirit person and help them cross over into the light. Now, this is where the other parts of lawyering came in useful, because you have to sometimes negotiate with them and convince them to go. Because I always ask them, I wonder why I ever became a lawyer, because this is what I'm meant to do. Why did I become a lawyer? Then it's like, once I took stock of it, it's like, oh yeah, this makes perfect sense. It's all evidentiary. And also for the mediumship, I was a litigation lawyer and I was a criminal lawyer as well for many years. It's like, well, this is perfect because I've got to do heavy negotiating with these people and convince them. It's like working with a jury, really. So I saw there's many ways that the legal career actually is quite helpful.
That's interesting. Yeah. So can you talk about uncrossed spirit versus crossed? I think the extent of what I know is from Casper of the movie where they're in search of the mother and she's like, I don't have unfinished business. I've crossed over.
This can be a contentious thing, actually, because, with mediumship, if people are members of the spiritualist church, what they're going to say is, well, this is the biggest lot of nonsense they've ever heard. There is no such thing. It's all you're crazy. But I know that to be not true, so the natural progression of the soul for people is when you die, your body falls away and that spirit is still survived. And it'll move in through the light portal into the high vibration, which we call the other side. Positive vibration, they leave their entire worldly experience behind, all the ego, everything attached to the trials and tribulations of living here on earth. So they're pure spirit there. Sometimes a soul might not cross over into the light. That light is always available, always available. But sometimes they don't cross, and it can be for a variety of reasons. It could be a very sudden passing. It can be a sudden car accident. That could be a sudden heart attack. It can be a murder. It can be a suicide. They die, but they don't realize they're dead. So they're actually in a state of confusion. So they don't cross over. Another reason why spirits might not cross could be an ingrained religious belief. So, for example, I was raised Catholic. So Catholics believe if you commit suicide, your soul's condemned, right? So someone who might, due to an ingrained religious belief, you kill yourself, it's like, oh my God, what have I done? What's going to happen? Punishment. And maybe I'll just stay right here. They don't cross over. Another example could be promises made. If you think of a couple who might have been married for 60 years and the old man gets sick and his wife says, please don't ever leave me. And he says, I promise you I'll never leave. So he dies, he goes back home to be with his wife, and they can live in peace and harmony, right? And then maybe the woman starts to get sick, she's getting older, she dies, she sees the light, she sees her whole family, and off she goes. Now the man is stuck in the house, his wife is gone, she's crossed over. Now what happens, the family sell the house, new people move in, they start getting rid of the furniture, start doing renovations, and he gets riled up. And then you get like a house haunting, where like people feel this push for them to get out of the house. So he's just upset. And he's also confused now. He doesn't realize he's dead. So it's more like confused spirit. But the thing is with these earthbound spirits is they're still very attached to the etheric plane. So they still hold on to their mental and emotional state they had at the time of their death. So if they were depressed, they're still going to be depressed. If they were alcoholics, they're still going to be an alcoholic. They haven't shed that part yet. So this is where it can affect the living. Because if you think of energy, we think of the law of attraction, the law of magnetism, like attracts like. So with these spirits, no longer with their physical body, they will have a certain kind of vibration about them. So if you think of someone who might be suicidal or depressed, that's their energy, that's the quality of their light, their vibration. And then you might have someone who's living, and the spirit might be around them, and they're not really looking at the living person's appearance or anything, but they're looking more at the light. And it's a similar kind of vibration. So, oh, that person's depressed, or that person's feeling sad. I'm drawn to that. So they blend with the energy of the living person. And then maybe a person who was sad suddenly takes on this depression from an earthbound spirit. So what it can do is it can then amplify what they are feeling. So where their sadness now becomes depression, suicidal thoughts. That's obviously an extreme example. So they can affect the living, and then sometimes people do get spirit attachment. I think clearing out spirits, earthbound spirits during the normal course of a healing is what gets done, maybe during a Reiki session, because they clear the spiritual plane. And most people, I think, are really unaware when they even have an attachment. They can come and go. I get them, they come and go. Sometimes you're not even aware of them. It can be a slight change, an energy drain, a mood swing. But then some people really do get a tough time when these energies like really start to attach and to affect the living. So that's what spirit rescue mediumship is. It's the healing. So you help to release these spirits into the light and to help clear the person. And that's going to involve a lot of spiritual life coaching, changing their mindset, raising their vibration, clearing out their trauma, so that the quality of their energy is no longer going to attract that kind of thing. So for example, if someone's an alcoholic, you might start attracting spirit who've got addiction problems to you, and then your alcoholism gets worse. So it's more in a healing capacity.
It's amazing work.
Yeah.
It's interesting. With spirit, there's positive, there's negative. Then you also have that further field, which is the more horrifying stuff like demonic possession, all that kind of stuff. Those are inhuman spirits. So there's that field of work, very much of which the Catholic Church does exorcisms, that kind of thing. So this work can be stepped up to more the negative side, which is very challenging. I think people who do that kind of work, you really need to specialize in that. I've stepped back from that probably in the last 10 years or so. I no longer really want to work with the more negative stuff. But I'll go and clear people's houses, so I might need to cross over some vanilla spirit, I like to call them. And then during a healing session, I might discern an earthbound spirit. Honestly, sometimes I don't even tell the person that's what I found, because it can be scary. As soon as you say that, people start getting nervous, oh my God, am I possessed? It's like, no, so I'll just deal with it because it's during the course of a healing session.
Yeah.
Particularly if some of their first session, but generally I won't even say it to people because it evokes too much fear, because it's nothing really to be fearful of. They'll feel better, they won't know that it's that, so that's kind of how I do it nowadays.
Yeah, and that makes sense too, because fear is a pretty low vibration, that if you didn't have the fear before and then all of a sudden you feel fear, that I'm sure is going to attract more of that energy to you.
Yeah.
And why would we even want to invite that in, right?
It's difficult working with clients who've got that kind of thing going on, because the first thing they do is they hop on the internet and then they go down this hole.
Yeah.
And then they become super paranoid because everyone's got an opinion, and then they start to see signs and stuff into literally everything, and I try and say, stop reading the internet, stop reading so many books. They might come in with a serious affliction. They come in, they've got all these books on demons and all this kind of stuff, It's like their minds run away with them, So it's quite challenging to work with that kind of thing, actually. Yeah. It's not pleasant work to work with that negative stuff,
Yeah, I can see that. So I'm so curious. I have to ask this, having spent some time of my childhood with Ouija boards. Can you really, as kids, channel spirits that way?
Well, you can, because a Ouija board can open a portal. I can't believe they sell these things in toy stores. But the thing is, you've got to be so careful with it, because it can be fine, but if you don't know what you're doing, you potentially can pull in something negative. It is a part of physical mediumship. So sometimes we'll train the mediums with a Ouija board. And we do a lot of protection, we know what we're doing, but every now and then we get something negative on the board, right? So we have to close it up. So in my spirit rescue practice, now I worked with a lot of kids and teenagers who picked up big problems with the Ouija board.
Wow.
Because there's no evidence, you're not checking. Any spirit can come and say, hello, I'm your dad, well, how do we know?
Right.
Yeah.
So the thing is, it starts off very harmless, they're just having fun, but now they're starting to speak to a spirit, so they've invited a spirit in. Then let's say something scary happens, because scary things can happen when you're working with it. And then they all get a fright. What are the first thing they do? They all take their hands off the planchette, right, to the little glass. Then they're scared. Then they want to go and do something else, or like, let's pack it away. But the thing is, they've opened the portal and the presence is there. So really, you don't want to be taking your fingers off when something happens. You want to stay with that connection, and you want to shut it down and get rid of whoever's there. Because once you open a portal to something that you might not want around, closing the door after that can be challenging. So sometimes people do pick up a problem. One should have respect for this kind of work. Don't look upon it as a parlor game entertainment. Have a healthy respect. I respect the Ouija board. I'm very careful when I work with it. As soon as I sense, I don't know so much about this, okay, we're shutting down. Off you go now, friend. Let's go. So I don't recommend that kids, it's awful that kids play with it, actually.
Oh.
I remember being a child with a pendulum, convent, Catholic school.
Wow.
Someone walked in with this thread and a little coin and said, oh, we can speak to spirit. And they were like doing this thing, and someone handed it to me and said, ask spirit if they're there. And I held and I knew I wasn't moving. I got the fright of my life when that thing started moving. So I think luckily I've always been quite fearful of this kind of stuff. So I didn't really get myself into too many problems. So I was watching all the horror movies. So I kind of believe that stuff.
Yeah, I grew up watching that stuff too, which is why I think I would get freaked out with the Ouija board. So
tonight we were doing table tipping in the seance room.
Oh.
So we have an antique pie crust table. It swivels.
Yeah.
So I guess in a way that's pretty similar to Ouija. So we sit with our fingers on it and we can ask questions and it spins and it will spell out. So from left to right, we'll say, well, how many letters in this word? They'll go 5. Then we go A, B, C, D, and it like kind of moves like this and stops at each letter. So that's pretty similar as well. But we have a lot of fun with it. But every now and then it's like, oh, no, we don't think we want to continue working here with the spirit. Let's close this baby down now.
Yeah. Is it just a matter of asking them to leave and to return to where you've come from?
Yeah, we ask them. We cut the connection and ask them to leave. And we close the circle. Everyone closes down. So sometimes the table will just use the regular table tipping. We use this in the seance room because the guides like to come onto the table and just show us actual physical presence of spirit in the room. So they can use the table and ring the bells underneath and knock on it and do all kinds of things, So that's the energy that we're building. But, sometimes we just want to break loose and have a little bit of fun and speak to all our loved ones in the spirit world and ask them questions. You've got to just know what you're doing. Education's always a good thing with this kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So I don't really like it when the kids start playing around.
Yeah, well, I will make sure we do not bring a Ouija board in through any children. So thank you for that. Good tip. So as we start to wrap up, any advice, any recommendations if you are going to get a reading? I feel like we covered a couple things, like not having this expectation of I'm going in and I want to talk to my child who's passed, or like our situation, we only want to hear from my grandmother, and then obviously it's a little disappointing.
Yeah, I think my best advice for people receiving a reading, go in with an open mind and heart. You probably want to hear from a particular person, but essentially it's a chat with your loved ones. So be open to whoever does come through. Listen to the evidence and know that it's not like speaking to a real person. It doesn't matter if the medium gets stuff wrong. It doesn't matter. Listen to the evidence in general. Is there enough for you to recognize your loved one? It's not an exact science. Essentially, every reading is experimental in nature. They speak by way of impressions. So sometimes we don't even know what it means, but we'll give it to you for you to interpret. We see sitters sometimes get very picky, like you spell the name Michael with a K and not a C. Well, that's not my Michael. You got the spelling wrong, so I don't know who it is. We see sitters sometimes in wanting that perfection and being so picky about what needs to come through and in the way. What they actually do is they're basically saying to their loved ones, we don't want to hear this. They kind of block the reading themselves. If you understand who it might be, you can recognize enough stuff, get a message. But if you want to be difficult and fight about it and be all picky and tear things apart, it's easy to tear apart any mediumship reading. From amazing mediums, you'll be able to shred something apart. See it in the light that is, it's a chat with your loved ones. How do you feel after the reading? Did you feel touched by spirit? And that's it, really. Yeah. Come in with no expectations.
And what if someone decides this is something I would want to explore? What's the first steps that you would recommend for someone?
If you want to explore mediumship is natural, right? So it's something that everyone can do. Spirit communication is something natural. Take some training. All it takes to become a medium is to say to spirit, I'd like to connect with you. I'd like to develop my mediumship. With my students, I'm not the one developing them. The spirit world develops them. I'm guiding them through the process. So spirit will work with you. Then you've got to go get down to the hard work of learning to meditate and getting your training done. Some people are very open to spirit and it's out of control because they have no boundaries. We use the words the natural mediums, but it's not really. All mediumship is natural, but it's maybe the super sensitive people. So they might have spirit around them 24/7, starting to, make them nervous, all that kind of thing. So those people should have their mediumship developed to also learn how to make sure that they're only connecting to spirit in the light and that they've got boundaries and they shut themselves down. So it's really just a desire to work with spirit, get some formal mediumship training in evidentiary mediumship from a teacher who is an evidentiary medium, and you should be good to go.
Well, thank you. This has been so fun to learn about this journey. I mean, I've definitely learned a lot.
Absolutely.
Heather, thanks for having me. Great to meet you, Natalie.
Yeah, thank you. And we will share all of the information for your school, and just we're really grateful that you could spend the time with us. So thank you so much.
Sounds good. All right. Nighty night.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your precious day to listen to our podcast. If this episode resonated with you, we would love for you to share it with someone you love. That would mean the world to us. Also, if you feel called, please follow our show so you will know when a new episode drops. If you want to go one step further, you can even rate this episode, as it allows our podcast to find its way to others. Lastly, we've done our best to share resources that you might find helpful in the show notes, whether that's a book recommendation or a website we referenced during the episode, a free resource, or more information on a guest who took their time to speak with us and share their knowledge. We would love for you to support their work too. You can find more information on our podcast website at becomingspiritual.me. We love you and can't wait for you to hear the next episode. Until then, know you have a place where you are welcome and you are loved. Welcome home.